I wanted to bring up something that I don't think I've ever covered before. Nanobots. Now, bear with me on this. This is literally just me doing this off the cuff. I won't have anything in the description except the standard disclaimers about COPA and Copacabana. So, someone heard someone somewhere in the world saying that 5G cell phone signals, or just the phones themselves, could trigger or activate. Those are words that are, oddly enough, triggers for conservatives and other people who sometimes tend to absorb conspiracy theories. Nanobots. And the assertion that it could be, in the environment or whatever, and it would alter your brain or control you or whatever. And they act like parasites. Now, if you're not aware of this, there's a very, very simple way of parsing this meme. Nanobot mind control parasites. We'll just call that for the video. And it doesn't matter if it's 5G or whatever. Do my best, Morpheus impersonation. I'm not even going to try. What is a nanobot? Now, this is going to surprise you, but they do exist. Well, not nanobots, but microbots. Nano means 1 nanometer, or 1/1000th of the size of something. Which means, obviously, if you have a robot that's the size of, let's say, this much space taken up, there are toy robots you can buy that are like that. Little toy cars that are RF controlled. So we can call those robots. You can put enough brains on a couple of microchips to stick it on a, Raspberry Pi running some motors and make something that's a robot. Okay. We'll make it 1 million or 1 billion times smaller than that. Can you make a robot that does anything of any value? And people invoke 5G or radio signals. Now, this, ironically, does have a tiny basis in reality. There is a form of active transport on a microscopic level that can make a steerable and self-propelling robot. It's not a joke. And it actually can be made to use radio signals. And there's various clever ways of doing this. And what they could be, hypothetically used for is to deliver medications or drugs, or perform surgery, or do all sorts of things. There are exactly 0 microbots, which is the correct term. Nanobot is not really correct because they're not 1/1000th the size of anything, but they are 1 million times lighter in mass because of the square cubed law of a practical sized passive bot. Below a certain mechanical size, making what we would call robots, mechanical things, machines that can do very complex movements, isn't really practical. However, making an object that you can have move around, even if it just would amount to, let's imagine one. Let's make an extremely tiny magnet. And also make it to where it's chemically polarized, meaning one end of it is slightly more chemically positive than the other end, or the side of it. Now, we can make it to where, if we want to push this, to where we can make this thing be able to flip or move around by manipulating magnetic fields around it. And if we could affect it electrostatically or electrically without invoking any magnetic fields that would be important at that point, making it magnetic for one function, electric for another, or in this case, electrochemical, you could make something you could steer in, let's say, a petri dish with some water, salt water, acidic water, lemon juice, something like that. That's about as high-tech as we've got it. These are inanimate objects that can be made to move, kind of. They mostly flop around, but they can propel themselves. They can be made to do things like be shaped, kind of more like a fidget spinner, but they'll actually move. And this form of controllable active transport for something can be useful in a limited way. And on an extremely small level. Thousands of times smaller than you could do for a robot, but it doesn't have any intelligence. Now that's where the meme comes from that radio signals can affect these, because there are examples of them that have been made. They work in a petri dish with water or gel or something. They can be shaped a certain way. Instead of a rod shape, they can be shaped like a curly Q. or shaped like the letter L. And each part can do a particular function. And combined together they can walk or whatever. There's even a macroscopic large robot, about that big, that can do this. And a radio signal doesn't control it, it powers it. But under those conditions, as you might imagine, the tinier the object, the less power you need. Now, these experiments have existed, and they've been, well, dropped. They can make things that could naturally group together and form kind of a structure. They can make them work in a cohesive manner because all of them are responding to the same signal. There's no way to control each individual one. They can work in a swarm, and that's about it. The main use of them is things like making a water filter that always repairs itself because it just naturally, because of the chemical or magnetic or electrical properties of these really tiny objects, have a tendency of forming some shape, like a mesh or something. And this is literally the basis for this idea that people hint at and do hand waves about. And it's kind of sad. It is. This is a technology that has found a use I've heard of. Magnetite, that's the material, can be thrown into sewage, and you can apply a magnetic charge, a magnetic field to it, and it will grab on chemically to volatile organic compounds in sewage and organic material in the process for other reasons, and basically pull garbage out of the water supply or sewer to where what comes through contains virtually no particulate matter, and it's transparent, so ultraviolet light from the sun can sterilize it, and also normal bacteria can break down the dangerous bacteria. And it's used in some water treatment systems, but it's not intelligent. But in a way, you could say that each one of those in a swarm that forms this big furry mess that turns itself into literally a sewer filter, each one of them is a million times smaller than the object it's emulating, which is, well, kind of a broom or a comb in the way they form and self-assemble, a lot like snowflakes do. And that's kind of the whole deal here is when people say nanobots or microtechnology or miniature robots or whatever, they're talking of the sci-fi ideas from various movies. Ironically enough, what I'm describing mechanically under a microscope looks like the little robot things from the movie Big Hero. It probably does. The Baymax thing. Movie. But you don't really have any real nanobots right now. We don't have any of these technologies. When they figured out they could make a single part move a certain way, that's like the equivalent to saying, hey, we can make a gear, or more at a lever, or a hammer. That doesn't mean the hammer can do anything, it just means it's a tool. And in this case, they break it down to, yeah, we can make little things that are spindles that can move in a certain direction. And if you can figure out which way it's moving, which sometimes you could change its direction or change its movement behaviors to where you could steer it around. But as for practical applications, nothing's come up. And on the mind control concept, this has to be mentioned. There are literally 0% evidence of mind control methods that work for every human. There are methods that you can use tailor-made to individuals to manipulate them, and you can have some effect on them. Advertisers and even Google do this on a regular basis. You're being manipulated right now, whether you know it or not, by just being out exposed to advertisements or politics or talk radio or whatever. These are the real mind control systems. Making something damage a brain cell or apply electric charges across your head or radio signals, that doesn't alter your brain in a way that would be predictable or useful. The best you could hope for is, in a couple of cases, documented ones, in some people you can cause them to hear something, but it's just like sending a radio signal to them. They're able to detect, that's about it. Or maybe hurt them. But there's a reason the mythology and the delusion of this originally was called the influence machine. Some madman imagined somebody pulling levers, just a couple of levers, to control his mood, that's about as extreme of a change as you can cause in a person. And as some of you out there who deal with pain on a daily basis from either working too hard or injuries that you've suffered when you were younger you're still dealing with, like a bad back or in my case damage to the jaw or everything else, it doesn't influence you after a while. You adapt. You would have to keep escalating or changing the stimulus. Hence the reason you see the news or politicians manipulating you. They have to change their story every once in a while. They got to, switch it up a bit. But when people talk about mind control like this, it's always about the method that would never work. Almost as if they want you to waste your time looking at that. So, did YouTube put an advertisement on this video? It's supposed to manipulate you, you know. I turn it off, but YouTube has decided they're going to grant themselves the right to put ads on everybody's videos. The button does nothing. It's an opt-in permanent. So, am I manipulating you? Is the advertisement manipulating you? Is the world manipulating you? Is it a system you're stuck in? Or would you choose to believe in methodologies that are openly published that have never worked except for literally turning sewage into irrigation water? We can learn these things. We can stop being ignorant. We can make it to where we're armored against stupidity. Because stupidity is what you harness when you manipulate people these days. Our own ego, our own needs, our fears. These are the influence machines, more accurately, the cogs in the system. Sabotage, sabot, a shoe or covering, thrown into the gears, sabotage. Diabolical sabotage. How easily manipulated are you or I? I strongly suggest that when you see people telling you there are nanobots, influence machines, and mind control gadgets out there, and mentioning HARP with 2 A's and all these other things, I strongly suggest that you look at them dead in the face and say, you're the mind control device, and it's most effective because you don't know it. That's the kind of thing they say to you if you disagree with them. That's a reflex. Thanks to the hobo in the boxcar for bringing this up. It was an interesting thing to ponder. Goodbye. Wish us all luck. And thank you for watching.